Mourners collected relics as if of a saint, a snippet of a drapery from the catafalque, a scrap of a crepe from the funeral train. Within hours of Lincoln's death, a bit of his blood-stained shirt would fetch a $5 gold piece. Many of these souvenirs survive in museums today, but what I find most affecting are the remnants of wreaths and bouquets still preserved after a century and a half. A single leaf of laurel, a rosebud faded to rusty orange, slain offerings as if springtime itself had been offered as a sacrifice. The train's last stop before Springfield was appropriately the town of Lincoln, Illinois, 30 miles north, more than a decade earlier, when the future president was still a state legislator. It had become the first of the many American towns that would be named in his honor. I stopped in Lincoln myself late one afternoon. It's a sleepy place, but the Victorian storefronts gone shabby. The main square with its hulking courthouse is nearly deserted except for a few teenage kids circling on their low-slung bikes, idly popping wheelies and bucking down a low flight of stairs. At a corner of the big old building, I spot a white marble column, the kind of Civil War monument I've seen in almost every country seat these past 1,000 miles and more. 100 years of acid rain have eroded the names of the dead men and their fatal battles, leaving the monument looking like a relic of ancient Egypt or Babylon. Not a memorial to the grandfathers of men and women alive in the town today. Blurred fragments of words emerge. Tomlinson, Darby Schiller. A more recent marker nearby quotes a local newspaper article from April 1862, a year into the war. It takes but small space in the columns of our paper to report the killed and wounded from our country, but oh, every name in the list is a lightning stroke to some fond heart. As I stopped to read, one of the bike-riding teenagers, a scruffy blonde kid wearing a baseball cap backward, coasted up and asked what I'm doing. Before long, he's spilling out stories about Lincoln, the town, and the president. Abraham, he says familiarly, all mixed up together. Tim Evans is 17, an 11th grader with a jumble of plans for the future. He wants to be an architect. He wants to be an underwater welder. He wants to go pro with his stunt biking. I point to the marble column and ask if he's ever thought of the military. Sometimes, he says doubtfully, but he's got other plans, just like the names on this monument. I think just like the 750,000 other names on other monuments. Each one the remnant of a life once as complicated, as tentative, as optimistic as this one. Lincoln was buried at last in Springfield on May 4th, nearly 3 weeks after his death. Townsfolk draped black bunting over the simple frame house that he had last seen on the morning he departed for the presidency. They tracked down his favorite horses, the one the Lincolns, and named Old Bob, which had been sold into service pulling a wagon. The animal walked in the procession to the cemetery, led by a local African-American minister who had worked for the Lincolns as a handyman. The tomb I find is a disappointment. Twice reconstructed single 1865, most recently in the 1930s in incongruous Art Deco style. Its current incarnation has all the historic character of an office lobby. The coffin was moved no fewer than 14 times in the decades after its original burial, as if no one could figure out quite what to do with it. Lengthy inscriptions on the wall, relics of their time, recount nearly every biographical detail except the Emancipation Proclamation. The body, a guide tells the crowd of tourists, lies under 10 feet of concrete. It's strange to think that there is a place where Lincoln still physically exists in the world, let alone that it's a place like this.